Tonight on Capitol Journal, Alabama's primary elections are over. We'll run down what happened and what's next. A runoff is taking shape in Alabama's heated race for the U.S. Senate. Hear what Katie Britt and Mo Brooks had to say. Several state Senate and House seats changed hands. We'll review the notable races. State Senate Majority Leader Clay Scofield joins us in studio to talk about legislative issues and a response to the deadly school shooting in Texas. And Dr. Jim Purcell of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education discusses a range of education issues, including the teacher shortage. Those stories and more on Capitol Journal. From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. After months of spirited and downright brutal campaigning, Alabama's primary elections are in the books. The Republican and Democratic primaries were held Tuesday, and unofficial results from the Secretary of State show who won, who lost, and who is headed to a runoff. Under Alabama election law, candidates must earn a majority of votes to win the election. If no candidate gets above 50%, the election goes to a runoff between the top two vote earners. Governor Kay Ivey will not need a runoff in her bid for re-election. She won the Republican primary with more than 55% of the vote, beating back several challengers. Ivey's win came after her main rivals in Tim James and Lindy Blanchard spent millions attacking the governor over the airwaves. In a victory speech Tuesday night, Ivey was at times emotional as she thanked her supporters.
Y'all, we did it. I simply cannot tell you how proud I am to be here with y'all tonight to celebrate this hard-fought victory. With all my heart, I thank you. I thank you with all my soul. Y'all have been great supporters, and I am so proud to be your governor. We're going to continue to grow jobs. We've created 65,000 and still counting. We're going to continue recruiting good businesses to our state. We've seen over $32 billion with a B dollars in new business investments. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the history of our state. And for the past 18 consecutive months, we have had the lowest unemployment rate in the entire Southeast. Thank you all so much, and may God continue to bless each of you and the great state of Alabama.
Something interesting to note, in 1966, Lurleen Wallace beat back 9 challengers to win her primary for governor outright. Ivey defeated 8 challengers in her primary on Tuesday. On the Democratic side, there will be a runoff to determine who gets the nomination for governor. Yolanda Flowers and Malika Sanders-Fortier will face each other on the ballot on June 21st. Alabama's intense three-way race for the U.S. Senate is now down to 2. Katie Britt won 45% of the vote Tuesday, while Mo Brooks won 29%. That was enough to earn both a spot in the runoff over Mike Durant, who won 23% of the vote. Both Britt and Brooks gave fiery speeches as the results came in, portending a heated battle in this runoff.
It is clear tonight that Alabamians want new blood. Yes! They want someone to go to Washington, D.C. and shake it up. It is clear that they want a true Christian, conservative Republican who believes in the America First agenda and doesn't just talk about it, but knows how to actually get something done. Who would have thought that this public school girl from the Wiregrass would be standing up here leading in the United States Senate race? Y'all, if that is not the American dream, I don't know what is. And what shows you is the American dream is live and well here in the state of Alabama. But when we look at what is happening in this nation, we don't recognize it anymore. And unfortunately, we have the liberal left that continues to try to strip that from underneath us. Folks, I have said enough is enough, right? Say it with me. Enough is enough. We live in the greatest nation on this globe, even on our worst day. And I want our children to be taught to stand for the flag and to love the United States of America. Am I right?
This Senate runoff is a battle for the soul of the Republican Party. It's a battle to advance the United States of America. It is Mitch McConnell's Katie Britt versus Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Rand Paul, and America First MAGA candidate Mo Brooks. Our message to the Washington swamp must be strong. You cannot buy or bequeath Alabama's Senate seat. It is ours, and Alabamians will decide which candidate best represents our God-fearing conservative values. I have never feared for America's future like I do today. Amoral, dictatorialist socialists are on the march, and they are winning. We need to understand that. They are winning. Alabama now is not the time to gamble America's future on yet another unproven surrender caucus rhino candidate for the United States Senate. I work with the United States Senate. Senator Rand Paul works in the United States Senate. Senator Ted Cruz works in the United States Senate. And I can assure you, we already have too many of these weak-kneed, dead junkie rhinos in the United States Senate. We don't need another one.
Again, that runoff is scheduled for June 21st. On the Democratic side, Will Boyd won his primary outright over Brandon Dean and Larry Jackson, and he will represent the party on the November ballot. Moving down the ballot, Attorney General Steve Marshall easily defeated Harry Still III and will face Democrat Wendell Major in November. Greg Cook defeated Deborah Jones in the two-way race for Alabama Supreme Court. Cook won 55% of the vote to Jones' 45%. He will face Democrat Anita Kelly in November. There will be a runoff in the Republican race for Secretary of State. Current State Auditor Jim Ziegler will face State Representative Wes Allen. Ziegler won 43% of the vote to Allen's 40%. The winner will face Democrat Pamela Lafitte in November. There will also be a runoff for State Auditor between Republicans Stan Cook and Andrew Sorrell. Sorrell won 39% of the vote to Cook's 33%. There is no Democrat running in that race. There will be runoffs in both Public Service Commission races. For Place 1, incumbent Jeremy Oden got 34% of the vote and will face John Hammock, who got 31%. There is no Democrat running. For Place 2 on the Public Service Commission, incumbent Chip Beaker got 43% of the vote to Robert McCollum's 36%, so they will go to a runoff. No Democrat is on the ballot in that race as well. And finally, a constitutional amendment that was on the ballot passed easily. The amendment allows the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to borrow $80 million to improve state parks. According to Commissioner Chris Blankenship, the money will be used to modernize campgrounds, add larger cabins at certain locations, and upgrade water and sewer connections. The amendment passed with 77% of the vote. Also on the ballot this year are each seat in the Alabama legislature. Many incumbents went unchallenged, but there were some interesting and competitive races. We'll start in the House, where several incumbents were defeated by primary challengers. In House District 88, Prattville City Council President Jerry Starnes defeated incumbent Will Dismukes, winning 62% of the vote. Dismukes, of course, received criticism after attending a birthday celebration of a former Ku Klux Klan member and is currently facing theft charges. In Jackson County's House District 23, incumbent Tommy Haynes was narrowly defeated by Mike Kirkland. In House District 7, Ernie Yarbrough defeated first-term incumbent Proncy Robertson of Mount Hope. In House District 28, former State Representative Mac Butler edged out incumbent Gil Isbell with 51.2% of the vote. However, there are some voting irregularities in that race, and we'll get to that in a bit. In House District 45, Susan DuBose defeated incumbent Dickie Drake of Leeds. In House District 72, 17-year incumbent Ralph Howard of Greensboro lost to challenger Curtis Travis. In House District 94 in Baldwin County, longtime incumbent Joe Faust was defeated by challenger Jennifer Fiddler, who receives 63% of the vote. Some House races are going to runoffs. In North Alabama's House District 4, incumbent Parker Moore will face Patrick Johnson in a runoff. They won 43% and 36% of the vote, respectively. In House District 14, two-term incumbent Tim Wadsworth of Ardley will face Tom Fredericks in a runoff. They had about 47% and 36% of the vote. In House District 55 in Jefferson County, incumbent Rod Scott appears bound to be in a runoff with Fred Plump, but a significant portion of those Jefferson County votes still haven't been reported. In southern Jefferson County's House District 56, there will be a runoff between Democrats Ontario Tillman and Teresia Huffman. There were several open seats on the ballot Tuesday due to retirements or other vacancies. In North Alabama's House District 2, currently held by the retiring Lynn Greer, Republicans Jason Spencer Black and Kimberly Butler will go to a runoff. Black is a former Limestone County Commissioner. Butler owns a photography business in Florence. In Walker County's House District 13, vacated last year by Connie Rowe, Republican Matt Woods snagged the win against competitors Greg Barnes, Keith Davis, Christopher Dozier, and Charles Waits. In House District 20 in Madison County, Republican James Lomax won 44% of the vote and will face Francis Taylor, who won 26%. In House District 29, which includes portions of Etowah and Calhoun counties, Republicans Mark Gidley and Jamie Grant fought a tight battle. The latest results show Gidley on top with 50.52% of the vote. Again, that Calhoun County vote is in dispute. House District 64 in central Baldwin County, Republican Donna Givens edged out Angelo Jacob Fermo with 51.67% of the vote. And in House District 54 in Birmingham, incumbent Neil Rafferty held on to his seat against progressive activist Britt Blaylock and former Birmingham School Board member Edward Maddox. We should note in those races involving Calhoun County that there were some irregularities with the elections Tuesday. According to county and state officials, there was a mix-up that might have caused some primary voters to get ballots for the wrong legislative district. The problem affected districts 28 and 29, both of which were very close races. Secretary of State John Merrill said that corrective actions will be taken and that more information would be available next week when the election is scheduled to be certified. Now on to the Senate, where there were some key races involving incumbents and some open seats. In Madison County's Senate District 2, incumbent Tom Butler held off a challenge from the man who preceded him, former State Senator Bill Holtzclaw. In Senate District 11, which includes parts of St. Clair, Talladega, and Shelby counties, Republican Lance Bell received 73% of the vote over Michael Wright. In Senate District 12, which includes Calhoun County and parts of Talladega County, Republicans Keith Kelly and Wendy Draper will go to a runoff. Draper won 39% to Kelly's 35%. In Senate District 19, current State Representative Marika Coleman appears to have easily defeated her fellow House member Luis Alexander with more than 73% of the vote. But again, much of the Jefferson County vote is still not reported. In Senate District 23, former Senator Hank Sanders will face Selma native Robert Stewart in a runoff in his bid to win back his old Senate seat. Sanders received 44% of the vote and Stewart received 30%. And finally, a razor-thin election in Senate District 27, where three-term incumbent Senator Tom Whatley is down by just 4 votes to challenger Jay Hovey. There are 87 provisional ballots to be reviewed, 67 of which are from Lee County, which Hovey carried handily. Candidates can ask for a recount if they agree to pay for it. Other Senate incumbents who fended off primary challengers on Tuesday included Tim Melson of Florence, Randy Price of Opelika, Dan Roberts of Mountain Brook, Shay Shelnut of Trussville, Linda Coleman Madison of Birmingham, Greg Albritton of Range, and Billy Beasley of Clayton. And that was your election. While this year's primaries featured many new candidates, there was one candidate whose name is no stranger to the ballot. Tim James has now run 3 times for governor and 3 times come up short of making the Republican runoff. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott caught up with the son of a former governor who struck out yet again Tuesday.
We are excited. We really sense that we're in the right place at the right time with the right message.
Tim James hopes the 3rd time is the charm. He's in a race for the Republican nomination for Alabama's governor's office, and he has an agenda.
Mental health is a #1 issue. Education is essential. I-20 is a trafficking mecca of human trafficking from the West Coast to the East Coast, right through Birmingham. We only have 450 troopers on the road. We're supposed to have 900. We've got to get money where it should go and quit spending money on stuff that really means nothing.
James is attempting to follow his father's footsteps. It was some 44 years ago, Fob James was elected governor of Alabama.
My dad, I love him very much. I'm very proud of my father. And he was elected exactly 44 years ago, 22 times 2. And, but I have to, pave my own way, as you know. My dad's 87 years old. He's well, and he is watching this race from a distance.
James and his supporters began watching numbers from his base in Montgomery. But this night, those numbers will go to incumbent Kay Ivey.
I called the governor about 10 minutes ago and wished her the very best, congratulated her on this race. She did a great job.
James tells reporters he's disappointed with the results, but it's his family that makes him a winner this night.
I am so blessed. I have a beautiful family, beautiful children and grandbabies, and I've got more blessings than I can count. And we just want what's best for the state of Alabama and what's best for this governor going forward.
Tim, you said 3rd time might be a charm tonight. Is 4th time a charm?
No, that I doubt. 3 times is enough.
For Capitol Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
Well, it is Memorial Day weekend, which is a kickoff to the summer for kids and parents. That means trips to splash parks and pools. City and state officials are sharing tips on how to prevent injuries and illness in the summer fun. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith has that story.
Parents love splash pads because the water is not deep and it's a safer water alternative for small kids. And kids love the splash.
But the problem is that these jets, kids really like to sit down on them. If you've ever been to a splash pad, they're sitting down in those jets because the water is spraying at their rear end. Unfortunately, it can cause pee, poop, dirt, debris to wash into the system.
The state's epidemiology supervisor says the water at some splash pads goes away into the sewer and is never used again. But
other splash pads recirculate that water. And when it recirculates that water, that chlorine and bromine, the disinfectant, has to work overtime in order to clear that or to break it down, which may mean that the chlorine and bromine aren't working as effectively as it could against the germs and kill those germs.
She recommends taking a shower before going into the water. Don't go if you're sick, don't drink the water, and take kids on regular bathroom breaks.
And make sure you're changing their diapers. You've got people who are using the swim diapers, but they're not manufactured to prevent leakages. And so you've got to make sure that you're changing those regularly. And then, of course, don't pee and poop in the water. That should be self-explanatory, but, you've got small kids. They don't know when to stop.
When it comes to pools, do not horseplay and do not run are common rules. But the city of Montgomery also has rules regarding pool toys.
They can bring flotation devices that are Coast Guard approved life jackets, but they can't bring floats that might obstruct the lifeguard's vision of the rest of the pool.
The pool manager also shares.
A parent might think it's safe, but if it's not Coast Guard approved, then it's not going to actually save that child's life, and it might actually give them a false sense of what they're capable of doing in the pool. So we do allow Coast Guard approved safety devices, but we don't allow floats or arm wings or things that it's way too easy for a child who has arm wings on to put their hands up and those just go sliding right off their hands.
And to swim in the deep end?
We do require a swimming test in order for people to go in the deep end. So before a child's allowed to go in water above their head, they have to show us that they can tread water for a minute. They have to be able to swim 25 yards without stopping on the top of the water. And they have to be able to get out of the pool by themselves.
All City of Montgomery managed pools have 2 to 4 lifeguards. For Capital Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Next, I'm joined by Senator Clay Scofield from Guntersville, the majority leader for the Alabama Senate. Senator, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Always good to be on with you, Todd.
Well, big week on elections. I mean, we have anticipated this primary election for really the last year, and it didn't disappoint. Lots of really interesting results from the governor, the Senate race, all the constitutional races, even some legislative races. What were your big takeaways?
Well, my biggest takeaway, obviously was, these were just pretty nasty races. I mean, the ads and so with especially the governor, the results that we saw with her winning outright without a runoff against, what were there, 8 opponents. My biggest takeaway was that the people of Alabama chose results over rhetoric. And I think that's something that Alabamians ought to be proud of. I know I am. And I think that there was definitely a rebuke about a lot of that negativity. I mean, they were saying things about the governor that just simply were not even remotely true if you watch any of that. And I think the public pushed back on that. Look, folks can do their own research. And folks have seen the gains that we have enjoyed in Alabama under Governor Ivey's leadership and under our legislative leadership, with the lowest unemployment in the state's history right now. I mean, people are working despite the other challenges that come from the Biden administration. Alabama is growing. Our economy is growing. We're making unprecedented investments in our infrastructure that helps continue growth. And I think the people of Alabama have seen that, and they spoke loud and clear at the polls that they support that.
Well, yeah, let me follow up on that, because you're right. I mean, look, there are always negative campaign ads, and it happens every year. This year did seem especially nasty. They weren't just attack ads; they were really personal, really nasty in some cases, and especially in the governor's race. So let me ask you. I mean, and I think we counted up where they had spent all told about $25 million. About $9 million of that was Kay Ivey, but she was just defending herself and having positive ads. The other two, Lindy Blanchard and Tim James, the majority of their ads attacked the governor. Well, they weren't successful. So my question is, do you think the lack of success there would be maybe a deterrent in the future for candidates to go that low with negative ads?
I would certainly hope so. The problem is if they weren't effective, people wouldn't do it. I would hope that they become less effective. For me personally as a voter, tell me as a candidate what you want to do, or if you're a current elected official, what your record is, and also what you want to do in the future. I don't want to hear you talk about your opponent. Tell me about what you're going to do. That's what matters to me as a voter. And frankly, I think that most voters agree with that. And I hope that certainly we may, I'm sure, continue to see some negative ads, but that type of really low personal type attacks, especially those that just simply are not true, I hope this sends a message that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to win an election. And frankly, you're not going to win an election if you engage in that type of advertising.
Well, there were several key legislative races. There were several open seats. There were also just competitive seats and competitive primaries. We can't go completely down the list, but the legislature will look a lot different in terms of new faces in the House and the Senate. How does that work for you as the majority leader? How do y'all deal with that, understanding that the makeup is just significantly different next session?
Well, institutions are greater than men, and I will add women. That's one thing that I love and respect about the Alabama State Senate, is that whether we're there or not, that institution remains. And so, that we will work with whoever is in any of the 35 Senate seats. I'm sure the House will do the same. And so, we will have several new faces. We had, 5 open Senate seats, 3 Republican and 2 Democrat. And so obviously there will be 5 new members there. We still have 2 or 1 incumbent that is we won't know until next week on the result of that. But frankly, we didn't have a lot of challenges to our incumbents and on the Republican side, and I think that's a testament to the quality of our members. We have really great members that work very hard for their districts, and I think the work product that we have been able to get passed out of the Senate and the legislature as a whole has been very, very positive, and our lack of races most certainly reflect that. So it'll look different, but we're going to continue to provide good results to help move Alabama forward.
We might not be finished with this legislature. There is talk of a special session to deal with ARPA. Mm-hmm. Of course, you had the first round of ARPA funds that you dealt with partially in last special session, partially in the regular. Well, I guess the special session within the regular, but in January. That was just the first round. Mm-hmm. There's a second round of ARPA coming sometime this summer, and there's been talk of maybe August or September being a special session to deal with that. What's the talk there? Are y'all in talks with the governor's office about kind of timing it out?
Well, let me begin by saying one of the strengths that Governor Ivey has, and frankly the legislature has, is we do work very well together. Obviously, that decision will be up to the governor on when or if and when we do have a special session, and so we coordinated together in the first round of ARPA in discussions on how best to invest the money, and obviously this round will not be any different. And so yes, after these obvious elections are over, then we will be able to get back to those discussions, and but I don't think that you'll see anything really different as far as the way we appropriate that money.
I was going to ask, what projects? We know we did broadband mm-hmm. and water and sewer, some other things, but those were the big ones. What in ARPA II might we expect?
I think more of the same, particularly on broadband, on water and sewer. The most important thing, though, is that the word I mentioned earlier is not spending this money, investing this money. That is extremely important, because it being one-time money, we want to make sure that we invest that money in strategic areas that will help move our state forward. Our kids are going to be on the hook for this money for a long time, and so we want to be the best stewards of it that we possibly can. And so I think you'll see more of the same as far as how we look to appropriate that money with an eye toward investment.
Well, and with inflation like it is, maybe the money doesn't go as far as we thought in terms of buying materials, fiber optics and pipe.
Yeah, well, and you have the word of the year, supply chain issues, labor issues as well. Fiber with broadband has been about a year out on being able to order that and get it for a lot of our companies. Luckily, a lot of them had anticipated it and already stockpiled. But obviously, whether it be broadband or water, sewer, pipes and drains, what have you, the labor to actually install that. And keep in mind, this has got to be by 2026. So it's there's some significant challenges from supply chain to labor that we have to be mindful of and are.
Mm-hmm. Let's switch gears and talk about these shootings and specifically how the state might address public policy. I mean, we just heard this week about this horrific shooting in an elementary school. The 18 kids shot a teacher. Of course, that's on the heels of the Buffalo supermarket shooting. It's tragic, but it does beg the questions of how should public policy be changed or altered to address this. There's talk about guns and how the Second Amendment applies, but from a state perspective, what can be done? Do we have the background checks that we need in place for gun purchases? Do we have the red flag laws in terms of those with mental health issues? What would you say to these things?
Well, obviously it is absolutely unspeakable what happened in Texas and Buffalo. Absolutely horrendous, and our thoughts and prayers certainly are with the families and the parents who've gone through this tragedy. A couple things come to mind, Todd, is obviously school safety is extremely important. We need to definitely look and make sure that we are funding that appropriately with our school resource offices or officers. And I think, obviously with the Sentinel program that the governor signed into executive order some years ago, we need to make sure that take a look at that, get some updates on that, make sure that it is working, and just make sure that our schools are secure. We need to make sure that our school children know that they're safe. Parents know that they're safe when they drop their child off at school, and make sure that schools have those resources to secure their schools and have safety officers there on each campus. I think also our mental health. We're making very significant investments in our mental health facilities in Alabama. We are investing significant dollars to these regional facilities and getting them up and going. And I think that Alabama is going to continue to fund mental health in significant ways and change the way that we deliver those services to those who need it. So I think those two areas that we need to take a long, hard look at and make sure that our schools are safe and that we're providing for our mental health.
I remember this last session, the legislature addressed the commitment process, right? Kind of streamlining it. It was Wes Allen's bill, getting the judges involved and giving them a little bit more flexibility, which ultimately is a mental health issue, but also a law enforcement issue in terms of danger. Do you think, in light of these tragedies, that the legislature might address or take a look at altering red flag laws, for example, that again deal with mental health, but also public safety in terms of who can purchase a firearm?
That I don't know. I'm sure there will be legislation introduced that does that. I think we've had some of that legislation in the past. There's been talks about it, so I would imagine someone will probably introduce that, be up for debate, as would anything, and we'll take a look at it and see. But certainly, obviously the, Representative Allen's bill, anything else like that to assist with our mental health issues and capabilities will continue to be a priority for us.
Lots of issues to discuss. Really appreciate you coming on Capitol Journal to walk us all through it. And once again, Clay Scofield, Majority Leader of the Alabama Senate.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Next, I'm joined by Jim Purcell, Executive Director of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education. Jim, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Can you tell our audience more about your organization, AIC, and what it does for the state?
Yeah, the Alabama Commission on Higher Education really coordinates the work between all the campuses, both the 2-year and the 4-year. We propose budgets, make recommendations, and we handle some of the financial aid that the state provides low-income students.
Well, there are so many colleges and universities and around Alabama, and they're all kind of their own entities, right? So that seems like it might be a challenge to coordinate so many independent entities.
Yeah, everybody sort of has their own thing that they do, and they sort of advocate for that, and that's sort of why there needs to be somebody that can coordinate and give guidance to the legislature and the governor about what really the needs are.
Mm-hmm. So does that take place? You mentioned the budget process. Are you involved with the governor's office and, kind of maybe a conduit between the higher education community and those budget writers, both here in the State House and across the street?
Yes, both receive what we call a consolidated budget, and that is all the institutions let us know what they need and advocate for. We'll have hearings with the institutions, and then we'll make a unified budget recommendation. I will say in this state, that's just sort of the beginning. Our budget is sort of the starting point, and then the campuses, if they have a particular extra interest in something, they will advocate beyond us. So we sometimes are considered the base of what that conversation ends up in the legislative process.
I remember just going back to some of my first days in the State House, and back then colleges were super competitive in the budget process. I mean, they would hire different lobbying firms and really compete with each other for that pie, for their slice of the pie. Is it still like that, or do they more work together these days?
I think it's a mix. We certainly have common interests. Increasing the budget, trying to get back to 2008 levels was a big initiative we all worked together on. But then, we all have our special interests. We have a new building we want to have. We have a contribution by alum. We want to have matching funds. We have a new program that we think the economy needs. So all of them will be advocating on their own within the system as a part of the budget process.
Mm-hmm. How would you say colleges and universities are funded in Alabama in general? Meaning, is our funding levels generally, is it healthy as compared to other states, or where it needs to be?
Oh yeah, we're funded well. I mean, we're probably not exactly at the national average, but pretty close. The thing is we really have high tuition, and that sort of helps us almost be overfunded compared to others. Our tuition is probably 200% higher than the national average, and that was done because in this state the decision to who decides tuition is left to the trustees of the institutions. Mm-hmm. and so during the Great Recession there was really decisions at the base level to keep tuition high.
Well, that's interesting. Let me ask you about that, because I know that other states, like take Georgia, has like a board of governors, right, that they control that you can't raise tuition without going through them.
Right.
Has that conversation ever been in Alabama, that maybe having some kind of board of governors or something that has a statewide reach in terms of keeping tuition under control?
Well, I think it will be different in different states. In Alabama, both Auburn and Alabama system are all basically listed in the state constitution. The rest of us are elsewhere, but the whole decision on how you do that, because you can't actually ask Auburn and Alabama to say you will limit tuition. Mm-hmm. I have recommended to legislators along the way that perhaps you could put in the budget process that we will agree to this budget if tuition is at a certain number, but it'll be basically a legislative budget item decision and how they demarcate how they can spend their money.
Do y'all have these discussions at the commission level? Because I just see tuition as a, rising tuition as an inhibitor to your, low-income, middle-class kids as it keeps getting higher.
Yes, we certainly have that every year. We actually have a meeting where we actually just all we talk about is how support we are. We do get great support from the state. We're very appreciative, and we do talk about the high price of tuition. I will say the community colleges are still a bargain, and they've been real good about maintaining a good tuition rate. But the university as a whole have basically really didn't do any reductions in like other states had to do during the recession, because they really had the ability to write their own check.
Well, one way to combat that is federal student aid, and I guess this is the first year that those FAFSA applications, the free applications for federal student aid, were required for high school students, and we saw an uptick in that. Is that correct?
Yes, we're actually ahead of more students filled out the FAFSA this year than any time before. Probably, I think, close to 60% have filled out the FAFSA that went to the public schools, about 55% counting the privates. And we've made great progress. We normally are ranked in the mid-20s as people who actually take advantage of the FAFSA. We're in the top 8 right now. We did a 30% increase since last year over what we normally do in participation in the FAFSA. That's going to make a big difference for people having the ability to go to a community college or a university next year.
And wasn't there the thought that we're basically leaving money on the table by not applying? You may not think you are eligible when you are, and so millions get left on the table for folks just not filling out their FAFSA forms.
Yes, no, I think it was a great decision by the State Board of Education. We wanted to help participate in the solution. There was a lot of work. We helped with some of the background information because we actually have access to Pell, so we can sort of identify which students have and haven't filled out the Pell. And then the school districts, the career coaches, and ALSDE, we all worked together to try to make sure we had good conversations with parents and the students about the possibility of getting some money for college.
Is that, I don't know if there's any data on this, but I could see it being an inhibitor, right? Just for a student thinking, well, college isn't an option because I don't have the money to pay for it, and not ever considering that as an option when maybe there are some financial resources available. Is that part of why this is so important?
Yeah, it's very important. Well, one, a lot of the state aid that you get or the aid that you get from a university is really dependent on having a Pell Grant application filled out. So it's usually the foundation for all aid packages.
Okay.
So it's not just really for need-based students. Any student who wants to receive supplemental aid, that really is the foundational data point that institutions start to look at.
Okay. You mentioned community colleges, and there has been such a increased focus in recent years on workforce development, and rightly so, from the governor's office, from the legislature, from the 2-year colleges, getting students into trades, getting them into trade schools. Been a huge initiative. But my question is, because that's no doubt important, but has that taken anything away from the pursuit of academic excellence in high schools and that pursuit of the college degree, which we know can really be a ticket in life?
Well, I think for those of us that went through college 20, 30 years ago, and I graduated in the 80s, certainly it made a big difference just to have a college degree. But the world changed. Automation has kicked in, technology has kicked in, and I think that all of us that go into the workplace have to have some technical skills or some proficiencies in something. So we've actually encouraged not only the community colleges to identify some particularly skills that are of importance in the marketplace, but for the universities to also go that route. We've encouraged micro-credentials. We've encouraged them to look to what the needs of the state are. And what I will say is the state's economy has grown so much in advanced manufacturing. Really, a lot of the jobs that are coming out there are bachelor's or master's. When the governor made her target of 500,000 new credentialed individuals that are needed in the workplace, 2/3 of those actually are bachelor's or higher. So it's not necessarily that they're all associate degree or certificates, but those 2/3 that we need are actually a lot more oriented towards specific work skills. And so we have been trying to communicate to the students that they do need to have some proficiency in some particular skill that gets them in the place. The data does show that if you do not if your first job is out of your major, or you will be underemployed for the rest of your life. So the specificity of a skill that is actually marketable will make a big difference, not only in their lives, but in the lives of their children and our society.
Huh, that's interesting. So are we seeing colleges put more of an emphasis on practical skills, things that can, as opposed to theoretical only?
Well, there's certainly a push by my office and others that that's the case. Certainly the Alabama Workforce Commission has communicated that. We do know how important that is. We do believe that people are promoted based on the critical thinking skills and their ability to write good paragraphs and speak well. So we know there's an important part in the career track for somebody that has a bachelor's degree education. But I do believe that the first job out there, they're going to be hiring based on what that business and industry needs, and they need specific skills in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that, after college, because it's been a problem for many years. They call it different things, the brain drain, where our great universities, proud universities, graduate people with wonderful degrees, and then they go out of state. They go to Atlanta or to Nashville or to DC or to New York, because some of those cities and metros offer better jobs, careers, and lives that they are after. But I know that there's been a real effort in recent years to keep those folks here, keep them home in Alabama, keep those skilled workers part of our economy and growing here back home. How have y'all been involved in that?
Well, I think it is really a big issue. Forbes magazine ranked Alabama third worst in keeping its graduates. So we keep about 50% of our graduates at a bachelor's level after 5 years. And so the legislature did fund us with some money to try to address that issue. And some of it is just sort of understanding why students are making that decision. And we did a survey actually the first year, and we discovered, we actually asked the sophomores, juniors, and seniors at our universities, because this is really a university issue, that why are you considering to leave? And we had about a third said, yeah, we're definitely leaving. We're not going to stay in Alabama. Another third said maybe, and then a third said yes. So we have about 2/3 of our population that really isn't totally bought in on staying. And then we asked them why. And one of them was, the reputation of the state, that they just felt uncomfortable about that. The other was the respect of others, diversity, respect of other individuals. And then the third was their perception that Alabama would not pay well, that the salaries would be lower in this state, even though it's a similar job. And that is the case. So their perception of that, I thought, was rather much more informed than we thought. I will say that they did like other aspects of the state, and our efforts by looking at this survey is designed to highlight the things that we think are beneficial and sort of inform the population that we sort of need to be much more tolerant, more accepting, and then we'll be able to keep more of our graduates. And I will say that one of the funny things was in the survey, all the women who were tending to go to graduate loved the beach, but the men loved the mountains. So hopefully maybe they'll come to Montgomery and socialize. But so there were interesting things about their preferences for things that they did like about the state. The opportunity to participate in religious activities was important for people that were interested in staying in the state. So there's a lot of things that we do bring. The friendliness of the people in general was rated real high.
Well, and I know you said the legislature was really funding this initiative, but I can't help but think when you say perception of the state, diversity, and things like that, the legislature is also passing laws that probably these students are seeing as really divisive and reasons not to stay.
Yes. So and we communicate what the research says, and we sort of have conversations about that. The other thing we do is we actually try to have students have opportunities to interact with business leaders more often on their campus. We're promoting a thing called Opportunity Tracks, which is a way to have communities that have incentives for graduates to move to their communities, to have open houses and bring the businesses there. An example where I hope we have our first one will be in Decatur. They have a thing for the best and brightest. So they have a loan forgiveness program for people with math and science credentials if they come live in the Decatur city limits. The criteria, though, is that you have to actually be active in our community service organization. So what they're doing is really building a future population that is engaged in local community effort. So I think that's an exciting kind of initiative, and I hope other communities do that. And I will say that we're not only stopping there on just trying to keep the people that are graduating in the state, but also encouraging people from out of state that have gone to come back. We've recently identified new addresses and contact information for the graduates who have gone for the last 10 years for many of our universities, and this will give us an opportunity to let them know of job opportunities in their same field that are in Alabama to see if they come back. And you've been here long enough to know, Bear Bryant used to say, "Mama's calling," and that's why I came back to Alabama. He came back for that reason, and that's what I think is going to happen is people will say, I could have the same job in the place, but closer to where my family, my roots, and my interests were when I was a young person. So I think that's going to make a big difference.
Is out-of-state students a factor? I know that some universities, including University of Alabama specifically, have made a huge push to recruit out-of-state students. They get that, increased tuition, and maybe it's good for them as an institution in terms of spreading their influence. But are those students more likely to come get educated in Alabama and then leave?
Yeah, they are, and I will say that certainly the data overall for all of our university graduates at the bachelor's level, only about 15% of out-of-towners, out-of-staters will stay. It varies widely by institution. University of Alabama does studies on this, and they found they can probably 30% stay, which I think is good. Auburn, has a lot of Georgia graduates, and that's, sometimes those Georgia people think Auburn's just a conveniently, located university that they go back home a lot quicker. But Alabama does a good job of recruiting from several states up north, and they like our weather. We did ask surveys about those students and why what they like about the state, and people from up north definitely like the weather. And it was interesting because those of us that are from Alabama don't like our own weather.
It is starting to get a little warm.
A little toasty, yes.
While I've got you, I really wanted to get into the topic of school teachers because there was this fascinating report from the Alabama Commission on Evaluation Services. That's just the wonkiest name in the world. This report showed that more than 50% of teachers, these are Alabama teachers, leave the classroom after the first 5 years. What's going on here? That seems like a concerning statistic.
Well, I think the whole teacher profession is having issues, and we actually did some research, and I loved working with those guys. They are brilliant and just brilliant minds. And I think they're actually recommending the right things for how we move forward. What we found in our survey totally mirrored that. We had 50% of the people said they were at least thinking about leaving within 5 years. We asked them why, and some of it was the work environment is a little different. A good chunk said they were retiring, so we already knew that we had an audience that was going. We couldn't convince them to stay. But we did find that they were concerned about the students were unruly, the parents were disrespectful, the community didn't respect teachers anymore. So some of it was just personal kind of issues. A lot of them were burnt out, but the scary part was the burnout was people that said they were going to stay and the people that weren't. So right now, I think the legislature this time did a great job of adjusting the pay scale and the pay structure. That sort of responded to the concerns and issues we had in our survey. They certainly have an incremental pay increases that address the salary concerns, but they also gave extra bumps for people nearing or right beyond retirement age, and I think that was just most clever, best policy, best legislation in response to data and information. So I was really proud of the legislature's effort on that.
Well, I mean, that's really interesting, and I agree, and everybody pretty much seemed really pleased with the pay raises, the step raises, and all that. But it concerns me to hear you talk about the reasons why they're leaving, because you can increase pay all you want, but if there's a cultural problem there in terms of behavior and parents, that seems like you can't really legislate around that.
Yes, I think a lot of it is those of us that work in education. We met with the superintendents and some folks from K through 12, ALSDE, and advocacy groups, and really started to begin to have this conversation of how do we make sure that the work environment is better for students, for teachers and students, so that they don't have those feelings and concerns about their personal safety or respect in the profession, in the workplace and outside the workplace. So that is important that we have to address.
Can there be anything done at the institutional level to to prepare teachers for the new reality of the classroom?
Yes, I think there's a lot more effort about classroom management, about how to do discipline appropriately. As you know, we're very into litigation nowadays, and so that's a lot of it, is how do you discipline with the concern of somebody's gonna sue you for something that you said or did, to try to discipline the student. And some of it, of course, is valid, but overall there is that concern. So those type of training where we specifically go through that, I will say there are vignettes and training activities that shows you how to make sure you control the classroom and sort of keep it sustained. And if we can help incorporate that in our curriculum, that'll help.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're out of time, but Jim, we've covered so many topics. Thank you for your time and coming in to explain some of these things to our audience.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Right. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with more Capital Journal, Friday night at 7:30 here on APT. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.